Good morning, everybody. It is Man Coverage with Knoxville Nate and Mr. Bonneville. It is May 1st, surprisingly, 2022. We are going to discuss the aftermath of the NFL draft. We also have a special guest today, former Minnesota Golden Gopher captain Crawford Jordan. He's going to join the show. Mr. Bonneville, how are you doing today, sir?
Any better be a crime.
All right, we got a little bit to discuss. One of the crazier, I think, NFL drafts in the history of the game. We had tons of trades, more trades than I've ever seen, and not to mention the players. You know, this is a college football show, so we're not going to get it real in depth about the NFL, free agency. But I thought it was pretty crazy seeing all these marquee guys go in the the day of the draft, and I thought that was pretty nuts. And I think it's my breakdown of that is I think there's two camps. I think there's NFL teams that value the wide receiver position to no end and are willing to pay out the wazoo for a guy that can get it done. And there's other teams that are like, I'm not paying $25 million for a wide receiver. And we can just go get one in the draft because this obviously was a very wide receiver rich draft. What do you think about the movement on draft day, James?
Some of those trades just kind of floored me. Like I didn't see AJ Brown getting traded or Hollywood Hollywood Brown. You're right. It was on the tip of my tongue. I didn't see neither one of those trades happening, but listening to an interview with Harbaugh during the draft, it was just something he thought from a culture standpoint to move him on to Arizona, and they moved on from there. And quite frankly, you look at what Baltimore did in this draft. I mean, it was phenomenal. I think the pressure's now on Rashad Bateman quite a bit to pick up that slack from Brown, but I think he's got the talent to do that. So. Yeah, I mean, we're looking right now at we should really start talking about who really are the top four teams coming out of this draft. First and foremost, like we were talking about Baltimore, I mean, Kyle Hamilton and Todd Linderbaum in the first round, I thought were fantastic picks. I mean, Hamilton slipped back, Linderbaum slipped back. Linderbaum is by far the best center in this draft I've seen in some time. And Kyle Hamilton, the talent speaks for itself. I mean, he can come up in the box and really do a lot of work up front, but also come back. I mean, Grant, he's a larger safety, so he's not going to have the depth, the speed that you really truly want. But I think you're getting in that Taylor Mays kind of thought process of that longer, thicker safety that could really do some damage. I mean, Nate, what are your thoughts on Baltimore's draft?
I thought they killed it, man. I mean, my biggest winners were Baltimore and another team I'll get into in here in just a second. Fell in their lap. I'm not really sure why he dropped as far as he did, but getting him at number 14 I thought was a huge value. Picking up the best interior lineman in the entire draft. And yes, I said interior lineman because I group him with the guards, and I think Tyler Linderbaum is the best interior lineman in the draft overall. So getting him at 25 I thought was huge because they traded away their pick and then moved back, got that pick back, and then were able to get Linderbaum with that. So some pretty good maneuvering by their brass. And then to pick up David Ojabo at 13 I thought was huge.
If it wasn't for that injury, he's a first-round talent.
He may have gone in the top 15. So getting him 13th in the second round I thought was huge and was a direct result of him getting injured on the pro day. So I like that. And then obviously their fourth round pick, we'll talk about here a little bit later, I thought was one of the best values in the draft.
Well, not only that, Travis Jones out of UConn. I mean, quite frankly, I could have seen legitimate arguments he going at the end of the first round, beginning of the second round, and you get him for third round value. I mean, that's unreal. And plus you got Kolar, the tight end out of Iowa State, plus Isaiah Likely, who I've seen some people put as high as the second round. I mean, you get them for fourth round talent. They had a bang out fourth round. I mean, you got Falele, Armour Davis, Kolar, the punter Stout out of Penn State, Likely and Williams, the corner out of Houston. I mean, man, you can't have a better fourth round than that.
I agree. If you can get a couple of guys that can contribute in the fourth round, you are winning. And,
Yes.
we're going to get into our sleepers here in just a second. I want to talk about the guys that I think that were drafted in the 4th round or later that can come in and potentially start right away or definitely help football teams. But I do want to talk for a second about, another team that I thought won on day one, and that was the New York Jets. And I can't even believe I'm saying it. Being a Jets fan for the last 40 years, they've figured out a way to F up the NFL draft almost every time. I mean, this is a team that's had the number 1 pick. This is a team that's had a top 10 pick almost every year since I was born. And to come out and actually win on draft day blew me away. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I mean, to come out on number 4 and get Sauce Gardner, in my estimation, the best corner in this draft, I thought was huge. And then to come back and just sit right where they were, get the best wide receiver at number 10 with Garrett Wilson, and then trade back into the 1st round and pick up Jermaine Johnson, who I thought, and I expressed on the show, was my favorite pass rusher in the draft at number 26. I thought was amazing. So what they did in those first 3 picks was get 3 bona fide first-year starters right away. Why Jermaine Johnson fell, me and you talked about it a little bit off air. There's been a lot of discussion about it. Was it attitude? Was it his personality? I don't really know. I've heard some rumors, and you obviously have your guesstimations on that. But the simple fact is, as far as football playing goes, the guy's pretty damn good.
Well, I mean, the talent's there. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And, you look at it from where he played high school football, from Mike Grant at Eden Prairie to his time at Independence, then Georgia, then Florida State. I mean, heck, he was ACC Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, coming off the edge, he really came to play hard. But I think, there's a couple other people in that draft class that, may get some starting playing time right away. Breece Hall out of Iowa State, fantastic running back. Plus, on the 4th round, Max Mitchell, the tackle out of Louisiana. I mean, you look back at those Louisiana Lafayette offensive linemen, they came to play. They were hard-nosed, downhill blockers that did not shy away. I thought it was a fantastic class overall.
I agree. And was pretty fired up because I've never seen the Jets draft that well. And I agree with you. I think Mitchell was a great pickup in the 4th. I loved the 12th pick in the 4th round, Clemens. We're going to talk about him here in a minute. And then Jeremy Ruckert out of Ohio State. I mean, he was a pretty damn good tight end. I mean, pass catcher wise,
yeah,
guy can be a decent inline blocker. I think he's a guy that can definitely play. And they already picked up 2 tight ends, one from the Vikings and also Uzama, the Bengals tight end, in the offseason. So now they've got 3 tight ends, whereas last year they had 0. So they've upgraded that position considerably, and I think the Jets deserve some credit. Is there any other team that you really liked what they did on day one?
Well, I'm thinking complete draft, and that's Seattle. I mean,
yeah.
They really solidified the change in thought process of the culture of that program. I mean, they had problems on the offensive line. What do? 1st round, bring in their left tackle of the future in Charles Cross. I mean, by far the best pass blocking tackle in this draft. And then follow up in the 3rd round with a true right tackle in Abraham Lucas out of Washington State. I mean, they've got their bookends for the next 5 to 6, 7 years right there. Plus, in the 2nd round, getting that Leo linebacker in Boye Mafe, and we've talked about him extensively on this show. I mean, the athleticism is off the charts, and he's going to fit perfectly in the Pete Carroll scheme. But then coming back and at the very next pick and getting another Big Ten guy in Kenneth Walker III, I thought was the best running back in this class. And you look, the Seattle just keeps getting better. Plus, in the 4th round, you get Kobe Bryant, the bookend cornerback with Sauce Gardner at Cincinnati. They were known for that defensive backfield. Cincinnati had a bang-up draft as a whole. I mean, what was it? 7 kids from the program got drafted yesterday. Luke Fickell has done a phenomenal job in the development of that program, plus Tyreek Smith in the 5th, Bo Melton in the 7th, as well as Derek Young, the hybrid tight end of Lenore Ryan. I mean, fantastic class by Pete Carroll.
I agree. I think the Seahawks killed it. I think they had one of the better drafts of any team. Getting Tyreek Smith in the 5th round is a guy that can definitely produce for you. He flashed at Ohio State at times when he was out there. I love the Mafe pick in the 2nd round. They basically got their tackles. Their 2 starting tackles they picked up in the first 3 rounds. They got Cross at the left tackle. They're going to start Lucas at right. Kobe Bryant. People talk about Sauce, but Kobe Bryant was the one that won the Defensive Back of the Year award, in college football. So I'm not quite sure why he dropped to the 4th. Obviously, he's not the physical freak that Sauce is, but as far as technique and cornerback ability, I think he's right there with him. So picking him up in the 4th round is huge. And the only question I've got with the Seahawks is who are they going to play at quarterback? Because I don't like anybody they have on their roster. So
it's funny you mention that. I think they're playing for next year. Because you look at next year's draft class for quarterbacks, it is stocked. If there was ever a year you want to wait to get a quarterback, it is next year, because you could go down to pick 5, pick 6, and there could be a quarterback still sitting there. You could see the first 5, 6 quarterbacks people taken will be quarterbacks next year. Stroud, Williams. The list goes on and on. Bryce Young. There is a crop of quarterbacks coming out next year's draft that is going to be lock, stock, and barrel. Heck, Spencer Rattler could really turn his game around, be that top 5, top 6 quarterback like they were projecting for him for this year's draft.
I agree, but what are they going to do for this year is my question. Do they roll
Drew Lock?
Do they roll with Drew Lock? Do they roll with Geno Smith? Do they roll with Jacob Eason, or do they bring in Baker Mayfield or something like that? We're not an NFL show, but I that's just the questions I've got for the Seahawks going forward. But you know what? I actually kind of like the fact they didn't reach and draft somebody that they didn't like. I've seen teams do that all the time, and then you're stuck with this guy for 4 or 5 years. If you don't like somebody, don't draft him. I think Drew Lock and Geno can hold it down. So I love what the Seahawks did. But I want to dive in while we've still got some time here. I want to break down the guys that we thought, really were steals of the late rounds, and guys that we thought got picked up and, are going to make an immediate impact that were drafted in rounds 4 or later. And one guy that I want to talk about first is a guy that I think we've discussed on the show, and a guy that really holds true for us today, because obviously you are a Minnesota guy. We're going to have Crawford Jordan on later the show, who is a Minnesota guy. And this guy is a Minnesota guy. And I'm talking obviously about the behemoth mass of a man, Daniel Faalele, 6'8", 384 pounds, and the guy can move. And to get him in the 4th round, I thought was pretty freaking amazing. What did you think about him going in the 4th round? And what do you think about him overall, potentially starting and playing early?
I think he will, but he definitely needs some technical work. Obviously sometimes he gets his pad level a little too high. He gets his arms a little too wide in the process. Plus sometimes when, he gets to that first line of defense blocking wise, he kind of slows down and stops out of the play. But you can't go through him. You have to go around him, and he's not slow. He is for his size, he's got good speed from a lateral standpoint. So you really got to get there. If you're going to beat him, you got to beat him to the outside. Downhill blocking capability. If there are 2 people that from this draft that Mohamed Ibrahim is going to miss, it's Daniel Faalele and a guy that went in the 6th round in Ko Kieft. And if you haven't seen me film on Ko Kieft, this guy lives on serving up pancakes to people. He is going to do damage in Tampa Bay to help out that running game with Leonard Fournette and Ronald Jones.
Yeah, and I just think Faalele when I looked at him playing at Minnesota and I watch him play, I just see like a Raven player in him. And you could put a Raven uniform on him and just be like, oh God, that guy was like made to wear that uniform. He reminds me size-wise of Jonathan Ogden and also the dude from Oklahoma who got traded to the Kansas City Chiefs.
Orlando Brown.
He just kind of reminds me of him, those guys a little bit in the way he plays. Obviously, Jonathan Ogden is one of the greatest college and pro football players of all time, so I'm not comparing them. But I just do think this dude is pretty solid and is going to do some things in the NFL and was a steal in the 4th round. So what do you think?
He's just a mountain of a man. I agree. And you think of how far this kid came. I mean, he never started playing football until his junior year of high school at IMG and didn't even play. He just practiced, played 1 year his senior year at IMG, then came to Minnesota and started halfway through his freshman year against Ohio State, where he had one heck of a game. I mean, this kid his upside is going to be there. Sure, he's got technical problems, but I mean, the metrics alone, you can't buy that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, you can teach you can teach technicality. You cannot teach 6'8", 384 pounds. I mean, that's just that's ridiculous.
Absolutely.
So I think that was a huge steal. The other guy I want to talk about is a dude that we've already mentioned on this show, and that was one of the Jets, the last pick of the Jets, honestly, and that's Michael Clemens out of Texas A&M. This guy I thought would go a little bit earlier than that. And I'm not quite sure why he dropped as far as he did. Maybe he just, didn't run as fast as they would have liked in the 40, and maybe some measurables weren't there. But as far as playmaking ability goes, I mean, what the hell else could you want more than Michael Clemens? This guy can make plays. This guy certainly flashed at Texas A&M. And if it weren't for their depth on the defensive line, I think his production and his numbers would have been way higher. But this is still a dude that can be a disruptor. And I think a guy that can start for the New York Jets.
I agree with you 100%. I mean, you got to remember, this draft was incredibly deep. It didn't have that showcase. Like, usually you walk into a draft a month out and you could spot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 who's going to go in those top 5 picks. We didn't really know up until Jacksonville opened up their mouth that Trayvon Walker was going to be that pick. I mean, you and I talked about it, where we thought there's a pretty good chance he could be. But, I mean, Aiden Hutchinson just as easily could have been that number 1 pick. And it was a very interesting first round. I mean, you had guys going the 3rd and 4th round that could have been first-round picks in other drafts. And I think there was just some good depth overall where you didn't have those showcase guys right off the top, where everybody's got some things. I mean, heck, look at Stingley at 3. I mean, people were questioning his heart, his health and viability, but you look back at what he did in 2019 as a true freshman, probably the best player on that LSU team that won the national championship, with guys like Joe Burrow, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I mean, you had some serious talent on that team, and still people talk about Derek Stingley being the showcase player of that program during that year.
Yeah, if he doesn't get injured, I mean, he honestly could have been the number 1 pick in this draft, in my opinion. So really, injury was the only thing that pushed him down. So I agree with you. I think this was a really deep draft, and I think that you saw how deep it was based on some of these guys that we're talking about right now. And another dude that I want to talk about for a second that got drafted, in the 4th or 5th round is the running back out of Georgia, and that's Zamir White. I mean, this guy, let's be honest. I mean, they have 4 starting running backs at Georgia. I mean, you got James Cook, you've got Harsin, you've got this guy, Zamir White. You've got essentially 3 starters that they just rotate in and out. It's the same thing with their defense, and the reason that 7 of their 11 defensive starters got drafted, they're loaded on offense as well. And I thought that Zeus, as they call him, is a hell of a running back and a huge pickup this late in the rounds. What do you think about him, and what do you think about the potential of him playing early in his NFL career?
I think he could. I mean, he is such a downhill running back. I question his health, because he just is such a hard runner that you're going to, I mean, you're going from playing 12 games, 13 games to 17 games. Plus you have preseason. Plus you got camp early on. I mean, I question if his body can keep up that constant pounding. But I mean, you look at it from a size perspective, he's right there. I mean, he's very strong. People question his speed in the combine. He really showed out and ran a 4.4 40 when they thought he was going to run like a 4.5, 4.6 40. He showed out. So the potential is definitely there for a guy like for a guy like him. There's a couple names and guys we've talked about before, like especially during our Senior Bowl cast. Somebody you yourself talked about was somebody Kansas City got in Kennard, the offensive lineman out of Kentucky. I thought
guy.
I love that pick, especially that late. I thought Kansas City really knocked it out of the park. I mean, getting George Karlaftis at the end of the first round, people were talking about him being top 5 like 2 weeks ago. And
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen that kid play a ton. Man, he was like a one-man wrecking crew. His lower body strength, he just manipulated people all over the place. I didn't know his background, that he was a rugby player in Greece before he moved to West Lafayette. But you could see, I mean, the power this man has in his legs. When they played in the Music City Bowl and Karlaftis didn't play, I'm like, I thought Purdue was done because he was their defense. And could you imagine if he would have played in that game? He would have been in the backfield like he owned the place. He would have had a freaking mortgage sitting back there with Herndon. Not Herndon. Who's the quarterback at Tennessee again? It's
Hendon Hooker.
Hooker, that's it, Hooker.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think if he and David Bell play in that game, then Purdue would win by about 3 touchdowns.
David Bell, another guy who slipped. I mean, I look at David Bell and Michael Thomas in the same breath. I mean, you want to go back and look at games where David Bell showed out. Watch any Iowa game against Purdue. David Bell, I mean, nobody has big games against Iowa through the air. Yet David Bell would have his birthday every time. Need to be in Iowa City or West Lafayette. He was huge time after time after time. And I thought Cleveland nailed it out of the park with him. Malcolm Rodriguez. I mean, we talked about him on this show, going to Detroit in the 5th. I mean, this kid, it's Zach Thomas.
Sixth round.
Sixth round.
Yeah, Rodriguez was in the 6th round and was number 188 overall. And that was a guy that I loved him. I loved him in the Senior Bowl. I loved him this year. To get that guy in the 6th round, I thought was huge for a team like Detroit that needs linebacker help. This is a guy that would run through a damn wall for you. He loves football. He lives football. He's a little bit undersized, but what he lacks in size and measurables, he makes up for in his effort and his dedication to the game.
This kid's, I mean, the number of tackles he had during his 4-year career at Oklahoma State is ridiculous. I mean, it is absolutely, I mean, it's Zach Thomas all over again. And where did Zach Thomas end up in? A lot of Pro Bowls. He was that good. And getting 6th round value, I thought Detroit knocked it out of the park. I mean, they got Paschal, the Kentucky edge rusher in the 3rd round. Kirby Joseph out of Illinois in the 3rd round at safety. I mean, the kid was a ball hawk. I mean, Detroit usually always finds a way to screw something up, and they did great.
Well, that's what I was saying with this draft and the depth that it has in the later rounds. Even the teams that usually shoot themselves in the foot were able to succeed because there were so many talented players in the later rounds.
It was crazy. I mean, but think about next year. You're going to have a draft where you're going to start off with guys like C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young, Caleb Williams, probably Anthony Richardson out of Florida, Spencer Rattler, Will Anderson. I mean, this is going to be a crazy draft up front where you're going to see people try to trade into like the 6th pick. Yeah. I mean, heck, Jackson Smith and Jigba could go out next year. I mean, this top 10 could be just absolutely stacked.
Yeah, I haven't gotten into my study as far as how deep next year's draft will be, but it definitely has more top end talent, has more quarterbacks,
absolutely.
Has more of the flashy guys that we think are 1st round worthy. A lot more guys that'll have 1st round grades for sure. But you mentioned Darian Kennard. This is a guy that we talked about when we did our Senior Bowl breakdown. This is a dude that's played tackle. He's played left tackle. He's played right tackle. He's played both guard positions. This is a guy that I think can come in and provide immediate depth on the Chiefs. And to get him in the 5th round, I thought was huge. I thought I gave him a 2nd or a 3rd round grade. To come out with him in the 5th round is huge. And then a guy that went right after him in the draft was a kid out of Indiana, and that's Micah McFadden, the linebacker who, I think really dropped because of his injuries. This is a dude that is a football player, and we saw Indiana become a force in the Big Ten, of which I really haven't seen since 1989 with Anthony Thomas, their running back. So it's ridiculous how good this guy can be. And, how I measure how good he is was when he was hurt and wasn't playing. You saw Indiana's defense go the opposite direction in a big way. So I think this guy can provide immediate depth for the New York Giants and potentially work his way into the lineup. What do you think about this dude?
I'm a huge McFadden fan. I'm going to probably age myself a little bit, but for those people that remember Paul Posluszny, the linebacker out of Penn State, I swear to God, these two guys are cloned from one another because these two people play exactly the same way. And Posluszny had a wonderful career in the NFL for Buffalo. I mean, this kid just has a nose for the ball. Everywhere the ball's at, he is right there. I mean, sure, Indiana did not look good last year, but that wasn't because of defense. Their offense was just brutal last year. But defensively, Tom Allen has that very systematic approach of keeping everything in front of him. He's a good coach and a program that really hasn't valued their football program that much. And, I think McFadden could easily start first year in the NFL. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think so too. And, just a couple other names that I want to talk about real quick. I know we're running out of time, but I liked the Rams pickup of Kyren Williams in the 5th round.
Yes.
This guy, ran a not the greatest 40, but dude, there's a difference between, you're not going to take a guy and stop the game and set up a track out in the middle of the NFL football field and see how fast he is. That's not what NFL football is. It's playing football. And as far as football speed goes, Kyren Williams has got plenty of it. And I think with him joining the backfield with the, like Cam Akers and the guys that the Rams already have, I think Kyren Williams will fit right in with those dudes. And to get him in the 5th round, I thought was huge. Also, I like the pick of, obviously I hate the team up north that I'm not even going to mention their name, but they wear those maize and blue uniforms. And for the Tennessee Titans to pick up Hassan Haskins, their running back in the 4th round, number 131 overall, as much as I hate that team, I have to admit he's a pretty damn good running back. And I think a guy that can help the Titans and maybe take a little bit of the load off of Derrick Henry.
Another guy from Michigan who, honestly, I don't think he got nearly the credit because he doesn't have those showcase metrics, but got drafted in the 7th round by New England is Andrew Stueber, the guard. I mean, he could play center. He could play guard. There's no technical problems with his game. It just doesn't blow you away because he doesn't have the massive size and the massive speed. But there's nothing wrong with his game. And you put him on that offensive line, which year after year the Patriots have been proven to be good at, and you tag team him with Cole Strange, I see upside for Andrew Stueber in New England.
I agree. And we've been talking this whole off season since college football ended, how this was going to be a pretty huge draft in the later rounds just because of the depth of it. And it turned out to be exactly that. And I'm pretty, I'm glad we had the time to go over some of those guys we liked and talked about extensively in our offseason who we thought could be game breakers in the NFL and ended up getting drafted. Now, some of them later, but, it doesn't really matter when you get drafted. If you get put in the league and then you can prove yourself and get on the field, that's all that matters, whether you're a 1st or you're a 7th round pick.
Heck, if you're an undrafted free agent, I mean,
that too.
John Randall is testament to that. A guy who had more heart than anybody else, and the guy's wearing a gold jacket now is one of the greatest defensive linemen of all time.
Yeah, and we talked to a guy on this show, Chris Booker, out of Ohio State, who was playing club football at Ohio State, and originally signed with Dayton out of high school. And we talked to him on this show. Ended up working his way onto the Buckeyes roster, and then it got invited to the Arizona Cardinals minicamp. So this is a dude who I'm very happy for. He was a really great guy. We had him on our show and talked to him, and got to know him a little bit. And now he's going to get his chance in the NFL. So I'm really happy for Chris Booker. But,
absolutely.
Wanted to have you go ahead and announce our guest as we looks like we've got him in here in the green room, and I'm going to go ahead and pop him on. Why don't you tell our folks who we've got with us today?
Well, it is my honor and pleasure to introduce a 4-year starter at the University of Minnesota, coming from Fort Worth, Western Hills, our friend of the program, Crawford Jordan, former captain of the Golden Gophers in the mid-1990s. Welcome to the show, Croft. Thanks for coming on.
Wow, James. Thank you for that introduction. Thank you, Nate and James, for having me on the show.
Hell, man, we appreciate you coming on. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing good. It was a rough morning. We partied pretty hard last night. It was actually pretty cool because Tommy Kramer, former Vikings quarterback, great, was having a party with some of his buddies, old Vikings that were there, and it was a good time catching up with him and those old heads.
So you were at that party with Keith Millard and Hank?
Yeah,
Thomas,
Keith
those guys?
was there. All
nice.
Those guys, Henry, all those guys. Yeah, we had fun. We had fun yucking it up with those guys last night.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Croft, tell us a little bit about your process. I mean, you started off at Fort Worth, Western Hills. How did you end up in Minnesota? What was your recruiting process? What other schools did you look for, and why Minnesota? What was it that Jim Wacker was providing you that helped bring you from Texas to Minnesota?
Yeah, I'll preface it by saying it's been about 29 years, 30 years. And I will say, for those of you all who probably don't know or haven't heard of me, James Bonneville is one of my best friends from nearly 29, 30 years. So he was one of the first people that I got to know when I came to Minnesota. We were in the dorms together as freshmen, and we've been great friends ever since. So I just want to preface by saying that it was an interesting road for me, and I could talk about it for days. But it started out, I came home from practice or workout one afternoon, and it was like 5:30, and I knew I had a coaches meeting with Jerry DiNardo and Hal Hunter, who were the offensive coordinator and head coach for Vanderbilt. So I come in to my house, and my dad kind of escorts me in. Like, I'm thinking, wow, this is kind of weird that dad's escorting me in. And I sit in the living room. I come into the living room and expecting Jerry DiNardo and Hal Hunter to be there. And they were there. But sitting on the other side of the living room was Jim Wacker and Bob DeBess from Minnesota. And I looked at all the coaches, and I'm like, what just happened here? And I had accidentally scheduled both coaches on the same day at the same time. And Coach Wacker and Coach DeBess, they said, hey, we're gonna go to eat at Wendy's. We'll come back in about an hour. And they came back about 30 minutes later. It felt like an hour. And then they said, hey, listen, we want you to come up to Minnesota. They were just at TCU through my high school career up until my senior year. So I watched them, went and cleaned the stadiums after games, because I grew up about 10 minutes away from TCU. So I knew that coaching staff. I knew their style. And, they were in their second year or first year at Minnesota. And they said, come up to Minnesota. We'll fly you out here on a Wednesday, and then we'll fly you directly to Texas Tech on Friday, and you won't regret it. You get to miss a couple of days of school. We just want you to come out here. And granted, that's way different than how it is today. These are official visits. They're paying for them. They put you up in the hotel and all that fun stuff. So I came here, and then they flew me direct, and I had a great time. And there's a million stories around my recruiting visit here. Just brushes with, I got to meet Christian Leitner, who was a rookie here, and he told me all about how he loved Minnesota, and it was pretty awesome. But so then Friday I flew to Texas Tech, hung out at Texas Tech for the weekend, sat in the office Sunday afternoon with Spike Dykes, who was the head coach at Texas Tech. And he goes, well, what'd you think about Texas Tech? And I said, Coach, I love it. It was fantastic. I didn't think this ahead of time or have any thoughts of it. It didn't even really dawn on me until that very moment. But he said, well, what do you think? What do you think about Texas Tech? Expecting me to say I'm going to commit to Texas Tech. And I said, Coach, I think I'm going to go to Minnesota.
I bet he loved that.
He's like, well, you tell Jim Wacker, man, you got a good one, but I'm up, and he was joking about it. And it was, but it felt right for me. everything, just the stars aligned. It wasn't a trip I was even supposed to take. They scrunched it in on a Wednesday. I actually had to cancel. I didn't have to, but I canceled my trip to the next week. I think I was going to go to Vanderbilt. I canceled that. Had to go home and tell my parents, because we didn't have like cell phones back then or texting. And I had to go tell my parents that I was going to Minnesota and break their hearts. And the rest is history.
Hey, Crawford, tell us a little bit about, what your knowledge of the Big Ten was back then. As a guy coming up, living in Texas, obviously Big Ten football back then was a long way away. Now the conferences make no sense and the geography of it has been pretty much thrown out the window. But back when we were a little bit younger, it still meant something. And, the Big Ten was big balling back then.
Yeah,
we had Minnesota, Michigan, Ohio State. There was talent all over that conference. Tell me what you knew about it before you got recruited to go there and what your thoughts were on the Big Ten at that time.
Yeah, I didn't have any thoughts, so that was pretty much zero. I didn't have much knowledge of college football at the time. I watched as a fleeting fan, and if something was on, if a game was on ABC, I'd watch, but I wasn't a big college football fan, or at least somebody who knew much about college ball. I didn't even really know I was going to get recruited to play college ball until about my junior year, and then I started having to watch. But obviously, the Big Ten, when I played back in the 90s, we were on top of the world. I bookended my college career with 2 national champions. My very first game I played against national champion Penn State. I played against Michigan every year, and they won the national championship my senior year. Tack in 3 Heisman winners that I played against, and all I knew was Big Ten ruled the world, and we were just a small dog trying to keep up, and playing in those stadiums and playing in front of those crowds. It's to this day really surreal, and I was just out there as little 5'9 3/4, 172 pound soaking wet guy out there just trying to hit whoever had the ball. And I don't care if they were winning a Heisman or winning a national championship or whatever, or the quarterback's throwing the ball and he's up for the Davey O'Brien. I'm just trying to win. I'm trying to do my best out there and enjoy that. But going into college, I didn't really know much about college football, and it was all. It hit me in the face when I came here. Number one was Wisconsin. We worry about Wisconsin. They're our frenemies, and we take care of business against them. And then we hang on for dear life against Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, Illinois at the time, Purdue. It was nasty.
Yeah. Well, a question I've never asked you before, and I'm shocked I never have. Because during that time, during the 90s, there were oodles and oodles of first-round draft picks, award winners. You said national champions. What players were you like that just kind of like pop out in your head when you played against them? Were like, holy crap, that guy's good. Like, it just kind of like blew you away. Like it didn't even show up on film that how truly good he was.
Before we say any he's, first and foremost, the very first game that I ever played my redshirt freshman year was against Penn State, who was the national champion. They had 3 top 10 guys on offense, and I lined up on third down as the nickel back, and I had to cover Kyle Brady, who was all of 6'9", 280 pounds, and he caught the ball right in front of me, and I jumped on top of his back like I did something, but it was a tackle, right? First play ever. And then a couple down later on in that game, I got to tackle Kajana Carter and fumbled. He fumbled the ball, and I recovered a fumble right in front of Joe Paterno. This is my first game ever, and we're down by like 30 points, and I'm all like, holy crap, this is pretty easy. And who's there? You had their wide receiver went in the top 10. I can't think of his name. I'm not doing it any justice.
Bobby Ingram.
Yeah, all-time leading receiver.
Exactly. They had, and then who was their quarterback? The quarterback played in the NFL.
Kerry Collins.
And then they had the fullback. So it was like that was my initiation into college football, playing against. And they were like, the coaches were like, it's going to be easier than this after this. It's all downhill from now. And it kind of was, but that was absolutely insane. I mean, that was insane playing against those guys. And then that set the bar, for the next 4 years, that I just looked at these guys and I'm like, okay, I'm on the field with you. Tyrone Wheatley or Eddie George. Eddie George was probably the most intimidating. I mean, the guy was just a freak.
Looked like somebody drew him.
But Mike Allstott and gosh, what's his name from Wisconsin? Oh gosh,
Ron Dane.
Ron Dane. I mean, all these guys we played against, and these are just the running backs.
Yeah.
Let alone talking about all the receivers and the linemen and the linebackers and the defenses. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, and we got to watch a little bit of your highlights right there. So, obviously that was big boy football, and you got to go through that whole recruiting process. And now you get to do it again with your son. And just tell us a little bit about what it's like going through it on the opposite end of the spectrum, being a dad now.
Yeah, Nate, it's weird. I mean, it's different. We've gone to the junior days, which I had never even heard of until my son started getting recruited, or at least these kids, you go and there's a lot of kids who go to these schools, and mostly regionally, right?
Yeah.
The schools here in the Midwest, unless you want to get on a plane and go somewhere else, which we're going to be doing here shortly. I think our month of June and July we've got camps that we're going to and visits. And now it's different than when, I talked about my recruiting experience. We had 5 official visits. You talk to coaches all during the year or whenever they can talk to you back in, this is back in the 90s. And you commit to 5 official visits. You might do a game day, sideline visit, but you commit to your 5 visits. And then after you go to your 5 official visits. And then after those visits, you decide who you're going to commit to. And then like a week later is signing day. So, this process is drawn out over a couple of years. For some kids, it's almost 3 years. And, these kids are not necessarily getting offers, before. It's just different, and it's different with every kid. My son is fortunate enough that he has the grades. So that factors in with schools, the schools that he likes, that he's interested in, have high academic standards. Where we live, what area we're in. We have, 2 D1 schools in this area. And then you start getting out into the Midwest and looking at those schools. But it's been really cool. It's just interesting. Parents are somewhat involved a little bit. I do have conversations with coaches, but for the most part, the coaches are on Twitter and on text with the kids. And we don't know I don't really know anything until after my son tells me, oh, I talked to this coach, or, we have to go out to this school on June 17th or whatever. And so it's just really interesting, different. And then you throw in all of these other variables right now with NIL and with the transfer portal and how kids are being selected. It really diminishes a little bit what's happening with high school juniors and seniors right now.
Oh yeah, that's where I was going to go next. And that's what I feel bad for some of these kids, because there's not as many scholarships anymore. I mean, you had first the COVID year where some of these guys are coming back for their super senior year, their 5th, their 6th year on campus, and that's taking away scholarships. And then you've got 2,000, 3,000 kids in the transfer portal, which some coaches say, hey, I could try and help to develop this kid from high school years, or I could take this guy that's already played in Division I college football that I know I can just plug in right away. And it's making it harder for the high school kids to get offers and to get scholarships. And, I've heard all over across the board, going to prep schools, going to junior colleges, whatever. But just tell us a little bit about, what you've seen with that and what your thoughts are with all those things coming together with the high school kids, having to face.
Yeah. On the surface, it is rough. It's a rough situation. And, there's no sugarcoating it. You hear from coaches. I hear from Coach Fleck from Minnesota, and he talked about sort of what it looks like for kids that are going in my son's class, who's 2023, who are going to go into their senior year. Those kids are not going to other than the ones who've already been offered and the ones who they really wanted to come in and the ones that they wanted to get off the bat, right? The rest of the juniors right now, just the effects of the transfer portal, it's the kids have until the end of this month, starting this month, May, right, to enter the portal. So now coaches have to wait until their kids enter the portal. And then once their kids enter the portal, they sort of have to wait to figure out if those kids are going to be leaving. And then now come fall or before fall, coaches are having to plug in holes that if you can't put a incoming freshman into a hole where a second string quarterback in a Big Ten program is leaving. Like, you just can't do it. So you have to find maybe somebody who's that caliber from another power, Power 5 school or whatnot. But so what I heard from PJ Fleck and his perspective is that it really pushes back the timing for these seniors. They're really going to start going back to the old school way when, 30 years ago when I'm getting recruited, where they're looking at these seniors as it's sort of at the end of their season. They're going to start evaluating the senior film come December and January. And then there's going to be that short runway of 2 months where you're getting recruited hard, sort of like the old traditional ways of getting recruited. So I think that's going to affect these kids, my son's class, certainly, and maybe even the next year's class, until things settle down with the portal and maybe they put some sort of parameters around the portal. But you know what? At the end of the day, the universe, I think, works itself out. And the silver lining to me is, and I played in the Big Ten, the silver lining to me is that now you have schools that aren't Big Ten schools or that aren't Power 5 schools or that aren't SEC schools that are starting to get talent. And you can have talent in mid-majors, being in that area, mid-majors, 1AA traditional schools that are powerhouse schools that are producing. If you're looking at the end of the day, they are producing the same numbers. And I hear it every single day and every single night, especially now during draft time, of these schools that are having just as many drafted out of their classes than these big time schools. So, it's not all about going to a Power 5 school. You can go to any school that's got a good program and have opportunities to play well. And then even, down the line, if, the portal, is something that you want to get into and you maybe want to make your way to a bigger stage, then you might have an opportunity to do that. Kind of sucks right now, but if you look at it in the long term, it opens up the college football playing field, figuratively and literally,
I agree.
Hey, Croft, now you've got an incredible friend network and played with great people, former players that you're friends with, even coaches. Who are some of those mentors that you had that helped not only develop you as a football player, but really long-term professionally in life too as well?
Yeah. One person jumps out, Daryl Thompson. He's a former Gopher running backs, held most, if not all, of our running back records, had a good career for the Packers. I've sat on his board of Boulder Options. It's a nonprofit organization that helps underserved youth in Minneapolis. I've sat on his board for 10 years. But 10 years prior to that, I started getting to know, or maybe even 15 years prior to that, started getting to know Daryl because I knew he was prestigious alumni. I knew what he was doing. He was raising a family. He was married to a former student athlete, just like I am. He has, Daryl has 4 kids who all played Division I sports, 2 boys, 2 girls. 2 of them are playing right now. And so I've just learned a lot about the game from him, his perspective, being somebody who, for him, he's been in the Twin Cities and he's been a prominent figure in the Twin Cities. He's also, Nate, if you didn't know, he's also our radio broadcaster for Gopher Football. And so it's just been fantastic, just being able to be around him. He's considered a big brother to me, and there are a number of other big brothers and little brothers in Gopher Football that that I stay in touch with and that I just feed off of. We feed off of each other, and I don't care if I'm 20 years older than them or 30 years younger than them. We still have this brotherhood, and we keep it strong as much as we can.
Nice. And obviously, thinking back, now that we're going back to our memories here, tell me about your biggest and best memory from playing all those years of the Gophers. What sticks out to you, and what do you want to share with our listeners today?
Wow. I usually defer to my Encyclopedia Britannica of 30 years, James Bonneville, to tell me all of the things that I can't remember. James always says, "Hey, do you remember that one game when you guys did this?" And I'm like, no, but I do now. Tell me more.
It's coming back to me.
Yeah. But no, I honestly, James tells me everything, and it's amazing the stuff you forget. But I would just say overall, playing against Wisconsin. I mean, I had a run in at a fishing tournament that we were hosting that Brad Childress, who was a former Viking coach at the time, he was the Vikings coach, and I was like, before the fishing tournament, I'm like, Brad, where's what's the quarterback's name, James?
Daryl Bevel.
Daryl. So Daryl Bevel was the offensive coordinator for the Vikings at the time, and I'm like, Brad, hey, where's Daryl? Is he coming? Is he coming to the tournament? Tell him Crawford said hi. I intercepted Daryl Bevel 2 years in a row, once out in Wisconsin in '94, which was the last time we had won the Axe in Wisconsin for like 25 years up until 2019. And I had an interception against Daryl Bevel on like the second play of the game. And then the very next year at the Metrodome, I intercepted it and get him again. So I said, Brad, yeah, tell Daryl it was great catching balls with him. he was like, you tell him yourself. And he was like, oh, by the way, I was the offensive coordinator. And I'm like, oh, God. I didn't even know that Brad was the offensive coordinator for the Badgers when Daryl was the quarterback. And I'm like, oh gosh. He's like, I know, I remember you and blah, blah, blah. And so it was just fun playing against the Badgers, win or lose. I had success against the Badgers, when we played against them, because it was just like, it was one of those games that we hyped up, and it's a rivalry, like no other. And so I was always kind of geeked for that game, and I try to show off as much as possible. And, playing, there, and even playing at the Metrodome against the Badgers, it was always packed. It was always crazy. And it was fun seeing like boyfriends and girlfriends wearing different colored jerseys, cheering and yelling against each other, and then kissing each other. And then, it's weird. Bonneville, one of my best friends, is from Wisconsin. My wife, who played basketball at Minnesota, she's from Madison, and she's still like deep down in her family blood is all bad. They're a Badger. They love the Badgers. And so it's fun having that just banter back and forth with my family even. So
nice.
Heck, my wife went to Wisconsin. So that's always interesting in our family. So, hey, when you grew up in Texas, did you ever think that a pig, an axe, a jug, and a bell would be that important to you as this guy?
No, I didn't even know what the word trophy. So the only trophy I knew about was the Heisman. Like,
hey,
axe, what are we doing with this axe? Why are we trying to win this axe? Yeah, no, it was no.
By the way,
you learn fast.
Before Iowa games, when Crawford and I are together for games, it's pretty routine that bacon is part of the menu, no matter where we're at, before the game, after the game. It's just part of the Iowa game. You have to have bacon because you gotta respect Floyd. Floyd the pig is a big part of our life.
Yeah.
Hey, you've seen a lot as a player, coaching youth today. I mean, heck, Jermaine Johnson, who just got drafted on Thursday, somebody from the Eden Prairie program. What advice could you give to people like Devin, your son, or even future players, or even current players that could help them from stuff that you've learned through your processes playing the game and even afterwards?
Oh gosh, I don't know if Devin is going to pick up on anything that I've tried to advice that I could give somebody else the advice to give to him, but no, it's just it's always working hard, and it's all about your own. it's all about what you want to put into it, and what you're going to get out what you put into it. And I talk to my son. I keep pointing. He's upstairs right now, and I'm in him every single day, and I'm sure he hates it. But it's just those little things that it's not necessarily advice. It's just things that I didn't have or know or even anticipate growing up. That, hey, if I can get it, if you can just hear something that I'm saying that will give you a little bit of advantage, maybe those things will add up, and you won't have to go through the things that I went through, or go over some of the hurdles that I had to go over to get by. And it's not just me going through those hurdles, it's anybody. It's just sound advice on, like, hey, when you come home from working out, make sure that you're taking your protein shake, because your body is going to be, your muscles are going to be tired. And I say that to my son every single day. And it's something that, like, who would have told me that growing up? It's simple stuff like that. That'll help you. So I think it's, gosh, James, in that question, I say things every single day, too much stuff. My wife and I send TikTok videos to our kids that are motivational, and I send texts to my son all day long that he probably hates to see, but as much knowledge and as much experience that you can give back to these kids, I try, and I've done that. That's why I've coached and mentored and been a part of any way that I can in helping these kids out.
Yeah. I just tell my daughter, don't do what I did. Whatever you do, whatever you've heard about your dad, whatever people tell you about what your dad did, listen to it and then do the exact opposite.
Exactly.
Because I had to learn the hard way with everything I did, and made it ridiculous to get to where I am now. But I made it, so that's all that really matters. But Craw, we appreciate you coming on today, man. It's been great catching up, and I wish your son the best of luck moving forward. I hope he enjoys it and sucks it all in, and gets to go wherever he wants. And like you said, man, there's lots of places to play, and the good news is if he goes somewhere and it doesn't work out, he doesn't like it, now you can go wherever you want, and there's no penalties. So tell him to just enjoy the process and have fun, and hopefully we can check back in with you and see how it's going down the road.
Certainly. I appreciate both of you having me on.
All right, man.
And I'm a big fan of the show, so I love watching and seeing everybody's perspective. I was just so when I watched Chris Booker's when I watched him on the show, and he was like, I played for a club team. I'm like Googling, what the heck? There's a club.
I didn't even know that existed. No, I didn't even know that existed, honestly. I'm a big Ohio State fan, and I've been an Ohio State fan since I was born. And, I know pretty much everything about the Buckeyes, but I did not know there was club football at Ohio State that wore pads, and that, these guys played in. And to hear that guy's story was truly amazing. And it honestly made me feel bad about myself. Because how much that guy's head, is in a right place at his age. Yeah. It blew me away. And me and James were talking about it earlier in the show. We were so happy to hear that he got invited to the Cardinals camp. Yeah. If anybody deserves it, it's that guy.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, man.
Keep doing it. I appreciate it.
We will, man. Thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you again real soon, okay?
All right, thank you, guys. Have a good one.
Give Sarah, Dev, and Vanessa my best, all right?
Will do.
All right, man. Thanks again. Thanks, brother.
Have a good one, Daddy.
All
right. That was the Craw Daddy, Crawford Jordan. That was awesome, man. He is one of the most well-spoken dudes I've ever spoken to in my life. So that was pretty cool. And he's got some good stories, man. He played against some of the greatest players in the history of college football. And that's what we're about on this show, man. College football. And if anybody knows about college football, it's Crawford. He played against them all.
It's crazy. Whenever he and I get together, it's like we just start running through stuff of players like the old running back Robert Holcomb from Illinois or Mike Allstott. I mean, heck, Eddie George. I mean, I just remember the look. He just turns to me and gives me the roll of the eyes of like, man, Eddie George was just a big dude. Yeah. It's good to hear from his perspective, because he's so easy to talk to. He's just, I mean, heck, he's a brother of mine. He's the first person I met in college. And I'm kind of shocked he didn't bring up our intramural basketball days too as well, which we had a rock star team.
Yeah, we didn't get to that. We didn't get to that today. We'll have to discuss the intramural basketball next time.
He averaged a double-double, and neither one of them were points. So
he did the dirty work, is what you're saying.
Rebounds and steals, man. This guy could pick anything off.
I like it. Yeah, we saw that with his highlights, dude. He got good anticipation, that's for sure. And he had a heck of a career, and I enjoyed talking to him today. And it's really cool, that this is another guy we've had on who's got to go through it, twice. He got to go through the recruiting process when he was coming up, and now he has a son going through it. And, we got to talk to Joshua Harris, the former quarterback of Bowling Green, whose son is now moving up, some of the recruiting boards and getting a lot more looks, especially after he jumped over 6'1" in his high jump last week or 2 weeks ago in the Ohio high school state championship. So, we got a lot of good feedback, and I just, I wanted to talk to him today about that because it's freaking me out how these high school kids are having to battle and how much they're having to go through with all these, these guys that are sticking around, like we talked about earlier, 5th, 6th year, so many people in the transfer portal. It's like some of these kids, are getting overlooked. And we talked to Marshall McDuffie, the head coach down in Tampa Bay at a really prestigious high school who pumps guys into the Division I normally. And he's experiencing the same thing down there. And you just got to get creative, I guess. And you have to, not get down if you don't get the offers that you would expect, just because the times are different right now.
Well, I've seen Devin play, and Devin is – you could see some similarities between him and in Crawford's game because, Dev can come up into the box and play, and put a hat on somebody. He's really good at tackling, but you get him in passing downs, he can sit back, and heck, he had 5-6 interceptions last year at Eden Prairie in a conference that doesn't throw the ball that much. And he just has an eye for the game. He's an incredibly cerebral kid who's very athletic. He's already jumped 6'4" this year as a junior. He'll probably be breaking the school record for high jump in the state of Minnesota and probably have a good chance of being the state champ in high jump in this year. So
that's crazy.
You just watch his body frame. Especially his lower body. He's just got a real powerful frame down there, especially his ankles are just thick.
Yeah. And I looked at Devin, when you told me that Crawford might be coming on the show, and I looked at some of his film, and it looked like he used to be a quarterback.
Yeah, he was.
And then moved to defensive back in the last year or two. So, a lot of some of this stuff that he's doing is new to him. And so I think to have the success that he's had switching positions like that, I think he's shown a lot of promise. And I'm going to be interested to see where, what happens in this next year and where he goes, because I've watched a lot of tape on him and he looks like a pretty good young prospect.
Absolutely. And his kid sister, Vanessa, she's going to be a bang up basketball player too, as well. Incredible speed, really a ferocious appetite for the game. She just likes to attack the basket. So that's a family that, Sarah played basketball at the U, Crawford played football and track. It's just an athletic family, but more importantly, they're just good people. They're good people to be around, and they're welcoming to everybody. So,
yeah, well, just like our other family from Minnesota, the Daltons up there, and we got to see Donnie. I watched the Oregon spring game, so we got some other folks from up in Minnesota that are spreading out across the country and doing good things too. So we'll have to keep a watch on him. Got his brother, playing out in San Diego State, and now he's going to be up in Oregon. So we're going to have to stay up late and watch the West Coast games too to get a handle on what's going on with those guys.
Got to get your Pac-12 and Mountain West after dark games. Absolutely.
Buddy, I've been doing it since I was 7 years old. My dad would come upstairs at 1:00 in the morning and be like, "Son, what are you doing? You're 7 years old. You got to go to bed." I'm like, "Dad, UTEP's on. UTEP's playing Wyoming and it's a tie game." He's like, "Yeah, it's 1 a.m. You got to go to bed." I'm like, "Dad, they're going to overtime. I'm not going to bed." Got to see who pulls this out. So anyway, great show today. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. We got to do a little draft talk. Now we can actually talk about other stuff now that the draft is over. So I'm excited about that. We'll probably touch on some of the undrafted guys and break that down a little bit. But now we can get into some of our previews for the upcoming season, because before you know it, it's going to be football season again, which makes me very happy.
Absolutely.
So,
the countdown is on.
The countdown is on. We can bust out and break down all the spring game stuff. I've watched the Buckeye spring game about 10 times now, so I can definitely tell you what happened in that one. And I'm starting to watch all the other ones too, so we can get into what went down this spring and what we expect to occur this fall. So thanks to everybody for tuning in. This is Man Coverage, Knoxville Nate and Mr. James Bonneville. Appreciate you, James. Enjoyed it today.
You.
And want to put a special thanks out to our guest one more time, Crawford Jordan, former captain of the Minnesota Golden Gophers and a tremendous player and an even better guy. Loved having him on the show today and appreciate everybody tuning in. So we will see you again next week, and we will talk more college football because that's what we do.
Absolutely.
All right. Adios, buddy. Have a good weekend, and I'll talk to you again real soon.
Hey, see that.